right. Next, we have the pleasure of welcoming our guest speaker, Louise Lee, a top professional leadership and a life coach. Louise has been recognized as one of the top 15 coaches in Vancouver by Influence Digest and one of the 8 best career coaches in Vancouver by The Best Vancouver. With over 15 years of leadership experience, she has worked with renowned organizations like Microsoft, Barclay Bank, and Nintendo. Louise is passionate about helping individuals and team achieve their full potential. Please join me in welcoming Louise Lee.
Every time I stand on stage and play the violin, there's a voice in my head, and it says, "You don't belong here." It says, "Who are you to play in front of an audience?" It says, "Louise, you're not good enough." And yet, I've been playing since I was 6. I've practiced, I've trained. I get paid to play. And yet still, there's a voice in my head that says I don't belong. Hands up if you can relate to that. Oh, got 1, 2. Okay, those of you who don't have your hands up, I'm going to question you later, because I'm not sure I believe you. But maybe you can relate, because it doesn't matter how good you are at your job. It doesn't matter how many years of experience you have. It doesn't matter how much your team love you. It doesn't matter how much your manager and leaders praise you. I'm guessing there is still a voice in your head that questions whether you belong. And that's why we are here to talk about that today. Not just the concept of belonging as a nice buzzword, but actually the importance of belonging and how we can create it, because it forms the backbone of amazing teams and amazing performance as a result. So, who's up for that? Some conversations about belonging today. So I'm gathering for some of you, is this the first time you've met some of your colleagues in the PC&S department, in this division? Okay, I see some nodding heads. All right, tell me, You can just shout it out. How's that been going for you today? Good, awesome, okay, all right. When we go into a room like this, how many of you automatically question whether you belong? Did you feel that this morning when you arrived? Maybe you didn't know that many people, maybe you knew some. But possibly when you walked in the room, were you scanning for people you know? I know I was. I know 2 people in this room. I was still scanning for them out of 350. Because that's what we do. That's what we are worried about. Do we belong? Let me tell you a little story. Our main character in this today's story is Maya. Maya is amazing, high performer, top achiever. You will identify with Maya. Her presentations are solid. Her slide decks are tight. She's well liked. She's been at the organization for a few years. And yet, sometimes, especially in meetings, when certain people are in the room, Maya has a good idea, and yet, guess what she does? Nothing. She has the idea in her head. She's sitting there almost vibrating. She's so excited about it. And yet something shuts her down. It's that voice in her head. So Maya came to me, and we had some conversations about it. And she says, I really want to be able to speak up. I want to be able to show my value to my team. I have these ideas. And then what's worse, and maybe you've experienced this, is that she has this great idea in her head. She doesn't say anything. And then guess what happens? About 8 minutes later, someone else in the room has a similar idea. They pipe up. And everyone goes, oh, great idea. And Maya is left sitting there thinking, God damn it. If you've ever had that experience, you are not alone. So how do we create a sense of belonging? Well, there's gathering, bringing you physically together, which is amazing. And whilst we're at it, can we please put our hands together to thank the committee who have created this and brought you all together. They provided lunch, they provided all the agenda. Thank you. So gathering is one part, you physically being in the same room. And I know for some of you, maybe working remotely is hard. I get that. But that's not the only aspect that contributes to creating belonging, especially in the workplace. So let's talk about the first aspect of it. Let's talk about Maya's story. Maya has ideas, and yet she doesn't speak up. Why? Yes, part of it might be due to the voice in her head, the one that's critical, judgmental, the one that says to you, you don't belong here. Your ideas are rubbish. No one's going to want to listen to you. But there's something else, and this is the first aspect. We're going to cover 3 today, because I like the number 3. The first aspect is the aspect of safety, particularly psychological safety. If you've heard of that term, please raise your hand, just so I have a little bit of, ooh, yes, wonderful. Psychological safety was coined by Harvard professor Amy Edmondson. If you don't know her, check her out. She's done a lot of great research about this. And she talks about psychological safety being the environment where we feel as though we can make mistakes and speak up without fear of being humiliated or reprimanded, at least not in public. But that is how she defines psychological safety. And that is the foundational aspect of belonging. Some of you might have heard that a number of years ago, Google did a global study. It was called Project Aristotle. In that study, they interviewed hundreds of the world's highest performing teams. Google wanted to know what made these teams different, what made them high-performing, what made them so good. They identified 5 traits. The top trait, number 1, every single high-performing team they interviewed had a foundation of psychological safety. People in those teams felt safe to speak up, but not just to speak up. They felt safe to take risks. Because not every idea you have is going to be a good one, and that's okay. Not every action and task you fulfill is going to be knocked out of the park, and that's okay too. But the difference between those teams and all the other teams was that the people on those teams, they weren't fearful. They weren't scared they were going to get fired or put on a pip. They weren't scared that they were going to get laughed at, or even worse, not even laughed at, it's just that cold veil of the slight eye rolling, the contempt that you might see from other people in the room. There was no fear of that on those particular teams. That is the importance of psychological safety. When you have it, it makes all the difference. I'm curious, how many of you have experienced that on teams you've worked with, where you have felt safe, knowing that you can say anything, make any mistakes, share anything, you can be vulnerable? Amazing, amazing. So part of what we are here today is to create belonging through that first pillar, psychological safety. How do we do that? How do we create a sense of psychological safety? Well, part of it is, I hate to say it, but it starts with ourselves. You cannot provide safety for others until you can provide safety for yourself. Well, what does that mean? Well, we come back to this, our inner voice. Tell me again, show me again, show of hands. Raise your hand if you have an inner voice that can sometimes be a wee bit judgmental and critical of you. Do any of you have that? Okay, keep your hands nice and high, because I invite all of you to look around the room. Look around the room at the number of people who have their hands up. And if you're not quite sure what I mean about the voice in your head, it's that voice right now that's saying, I don't have a voice in my head. What is she talking about? That's the voice I'm talking about. Yeah, you know. But in order for us to create safety for others, wherever we are, we have to work on the safety inside our own heads, our own environment, inside our own hearts. So that starts with us starting to really pay attention to when that judge comes out, when that critic comes out to play. We all have the judge character. So please don't judge the fact that you have a judge character, because now you're just feeding the judge. We all have that character. So it's not about it being bad or wrong that you judge. The invitation here is to start just noticing how often the judge comes up. Maybe it's with certain environments that you're in. Maybe there are certain people in your life that you just naturally judge more than others. Can any of you think of anyone in your mind where you're kind of thinking, oh, maybe I just automatically judge this person before they've even opened their mouth? One of my favorite things that I learn when I'm with other humans is this. When I'm with another human, one of the greatest gifts I can give them, apart from all the usual stuff like listening, your attention, you know that stuff already. But when I am in relation with another human, just standing in front of them, one of the greatest gifts I can give them is to not let my experience of them from the past color how I see them right now. Maybe you do that and you don't even realize. Think about it now. How often when you speak to someone you know, maybe someone you've interacted with hundreds, thousands of times, maybe a colleague, maybe a teammate, maybe your boss, maybe you already have an idea of how it's going to go. Have you ever thought that before? Oh, I know what they're going to say. I'm not going to bother. Why bother? Oh, I know how they're going to respond. And you automatically, just in a way, bring up a shield. But here's an invitation for you regarding connection and psychological safety, which is when you talk to somebody, whoever that might be, I don't care whether it's a stranger or whether it's someone you've known your entire life, is to not let your past experience of them get in the way of the person standing in front of you. Because here's the truth. The person standing in front of you, you may never have actually met before. You know as well as I how you have evolved over the years, how you have changed over time. Maybe your ideas, maybe your values, maybe your fundamental identity. You might have evolved. And if you have, that is amazing. I love you. I congratulate you for that. If you have, what about the person you're talking to? Is it possible they have? Just a wee bit of possibility? Some of you are probably thinking, Louise, you haven't met my father. Well, I have a father, so I know what you mean. But in all honesty, unless we allow for the possibility that the person in front of us could be slightly different to the person we knew them to be yesterday, then all we are doing is looking at them through an old lens that may no longer be relevant, let alone fair. So that's one of the first aspects of psychological safety, is being conscious and aware of where our own stories about this person might actually be hindering our ability to connect with them. So try it. The next time you see someone you know, maybe it's here, maybe it's tonight when you go home. Maybe you and your partner or the person you live with had a bit of a fight this morning, just as you came down to the convention center. Maybe you've been grumbling about it all day in the back of your mind. Well, this is an opportunity. I'm not saying forget it, especially if they've done you harm. But what I am saying is just to be open to the possibility of something different. And that is what belonging is really all about. How else do we create psychological safety? Well, a few ways. Again, as leaders, we lead by example. We role model it. So if we want to create a safe space where other people feel as though they can make mistakes and speak up, we have to do the same. We own up to our mistakes. We say, hey, I made a mistake. I read somewhere online, so we'll see, that NASA, they don't punish people for making mistakes, but they do punish for one thing. They don't punish you when you make a mistake, but what they do punish you for is when you conceal the fact that you've made a mistake. Because for someone like NASA, a mistake or a miscalculation can literally be alive or dead. And yet even NASA don't punish for mistakes. Because we're all human. We do make mistakes, and that's okay. The fact that you make mistakes doesn't mean anything about you, about your experience, about your skills, your expertise, your worth, your value. It means nothing about that. So if you have it in your head that you are afraid to make mistakes, which many people do, something I'm still working on, then let's get that cleared right here today. Let's detach those two things, which is your self-worth and how many mistakes you make. Because one has nothing to do with the other. You will make mistakes, so will I. The only difference between me and you is that I'm just a wee bit further ahead and trying to forgive myself in real time. That's it. I'll be honest with you. I heavily debated whether I would play the violin for you today. Because as I mentioned earlier, I have the voice in my head. But here's another thing. I normally play with orchestras, other people. I very rarely play on my own. I was petrified. And here's another admission. I made a mistake. If you knew the piece that I played, maybe you spotted it, maybe you didn't. I did. And it was everything I could do to keep playing in front of you and not pull a face, that, oh. But here's the thing. We make mistakes. Mine happened to be recorded right now. Who cares? I'm human. But this is what I'm talking to you about. The combination of humility and grace. So, psychological safety. It starts by us being able to clear away the past of the person we're talking to and really give them the benefit of the doubt. It involves us leading by example and owning up to our mistakes. It also encourages other people to do the same. And when we can encourage people to just give it a go, amazing things happen. You talk to anyone who's had any success, and you ask them, how many times did it actually not work out? They will tell you it is multiple. We don't often see that, especially in our society today, but it's always worth remembering that there will always be hurdles you go through until you get to where you want to get to. So that's the first pillar, psychological safety. So that's what Maya felt was lacking in those meetings where she didn't speak up. So that's Maya. Let me introduce you to another character in our story today. Maya's manager, Rajan. Rajan came into a meeting one random Tuesday morning, and something unexpected happened. Changes in culture don't happen through policies. They don't happen through PowerPoint presentations. They happen when something like this happens. And this is what happened. Rajan came into a team meeting on a random Tuesday morning. Everybody thought it would be the same kind of meeting as it always has been. But when he came into the room, his whole energy was different. He wasn't the big, boisterous, I'm in charge, I know everything boss that his team had been used to. He came into the room and he couldn't look them in the eye. He put his phone down on the desk. He didn't even sit down. And he said quietly, I need to apologize. The team, including Maya, was shocked. What? She thought. What is he talking about? Here's what happened the night before. Rajan was at home with his family. He and his wife got into a bit of a heated argument. She said to him, this is so typical you. You always have to be right. You can probably guess what his initial response was. No, I don't. I don't need to be right. You're wrong. But of course, he wasn't right. His wife was right. And as he sat with it that evening, he realized, holy moly. And this is a very common area that we don't see, especially for leaders. Rajan realized he had a very, very deep need to be right. And guess what happens when we try to be right? What do we do to other people as a result? We make them wrong in order to make ourselves right. That's what he'd inadvertently been doing this whole time, especially with his team. He would come into previous meetings and he would just offer advice, feedback, critique. He would tell people how to do things, unsolicited. His team, as a result, you can imagine how they felt. They felt as though, clearly I'm wrong. Rajan's right. He's the boss. And over time, you can see how this erodes psychological safety, which is part of the reason why Maya did not speak up with her great ideas, because she thought, what is the point? So when Rajan got that feedback from his wife, to his full credit, he did sit with it that night. And that's when he realized he has the need to be right, and yet he brings it everywhere. Here's the thing about the need to be right. Can any of you, well, let's ask first before I divulge. Any of you identify with possibly having a need to be right? Possibly? Yeah, there was some, really? Only like 5 hands? Oh my goodness. You are all so evolved. I love this. I have a massive need to be right. Huge. Oh, if you had seen me maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago, I know I don't look that old, but if you had seen me about 20 years ago having arguments with my partners, I would just logic my way out of things. I'd be like, but the data shows, and I would just, like spreadsheet after logic, just try and win. You can imagine the impact that had on my relationships. It was not good. Because I would rather have been right than salvage the connection that had been broken. And that is what Rajan realized. For so many years, he wanted to be right over wanting to relate. He wanted to be right over building a relationship that was loving and caring with his wife. He would rather be right than potentially have his team come up with really good ideas. So deep was his need, and I identify myself in that. So what do we do with that? What did he do with that? Well, the first thing he did was he told his team. He fessed up. For me too. The first thing you do is when you realize something might be getting in the way is to fess up. Hey, my name is Louise, and I have a problem. I'm addicted to being right. What do we do after that? Well, once we identify what some of those needs are, we can start to pay attention to how often they come up. Because when our needs are not met, they can be in the driver's seat of the car, and we don't even know it. So the first trick is to just be aware that it exists. So maybe for you, it may not be a need to be right. Maybe it's a need for recognition. Maybe it's a need to be liked. Maybe it's a need to be needed. Maybe it's a need to fix. Whatever yours might be, I invite you to take a moment just to sit with it. Again, no judgment, because we all have needs. So, what did Rajan do with his need to be right? Well, I mentioned just a moment ago that when our needs are unmet, they can sometimes drive our behavior and our actions without us realizing. So then the question becomes, how do we meet those needs? How do we have them be met? One of the things that really helped Rajan, and also helped me, regarding the need to be right, was just to remember that there is no wrong and right. Two different ideas can coexist together at the same time, because there is no absolute truth. There's yours, there's yours, there's mine, there's yours. We each have a different reality. And when we are able to really appreciate that our reality might be different to someone else's, that's when the possibilities open up for us in terms of understanding, in terms of being inspired, in terms of learning and growing, and in terms of collaboration and innovation. So that's how he managed to start to turn it around with the help of his team. Because here's the thing. Pillar number 2 is about being vulnerable. It's about emotional intelligence. And studies have shown that emotional intelligence is far more important than your standard IQ when it comes to being an amazing leader. So Rajan was vulnerable when he came into that meeting and apologized. Not everybody has the courage to do that. He needed all of his courage because he was basically saying to himself that he was, in his head, wrong. But when there is no right or wrong, then the need to be right disappears. That's the magic of it. And all that's left is empathy and curiosity that then leads to things like innovation and decisive action taking. So for that second pillar of vulnerability, authenticity, emotional intelligence, this is where we as leaders can really show up for our team. It's saying things like, I'm sorry, and really meaning it, or even thank you, and really meaning it. It's about saying something where you might be wrong, but you're willing to take the hit. I do that with my clients all the time. My clients, my coaching clients, they don't pay me to agree with them. They have enough people in their life for that. They pay me to help them think better. And part of how I do that is I challenge them lovingly, but I disrupt their thought patterns. That's what they pay me for. They pay me because they want different results, and that comes from doing different things, which comes from thinking different thoughts. So as leaders, we can start to do that, where we disrupt our own thoughts, our own thinking. We don't need a room full of people that agree with us. We want to encourage dissent. That might be a scary word for some of you, but I want to encourage dissonance. Sarah Jane spoke earlier about conflict. She stood up in front of all of you and said, I don't believe in conflict resolution. I believe in conflict engagement. I just arrived, so I thought it might be a bit weird if I stood up and went like this. But, some of you, that might scare some of you. You might think, conflict averse over here, and I get it. Because sometimes conflict can make us question our very value and worth in this particular relationship. But here's the thing, when we, using Sheryl Sandberg's famous phrase, when we lean into conflict, when we recognize that it's not actually conflict, all it is that there are just differing realities, then it opens up the possibility for us to learn. That's what I see conflict as. It's not really conflict. It's not something to be afraid of. If you are passionate about learning and growing, then yes, embrace conflict, because that's how we learn something we didn't know before. When someone says something to me and my old judge brain goes, what? Which happens. Oh, that was a bit loud, sorry. What? I have to kickstart the thought disruption. And I have to think to myself, hang on a second, Louise. They're not dumb, they're not stupid, don't be arrogant. And I say to myself, okay, what can I learn here? Because learning is one of my values. Maybe it's one of yours as well. And so after I've calmed myself down, I say one of my favorite questions, which is, that's interesting, tell me more. Or, that's interesting, what makes you say that? That gives me time to continue to calm myself down, but it also gives the other person an opportunity to share. And by saying that, I am inadvertently sending them a message that even though they may have said something that I disagree with, I still value their thoughts and opinions. I still want to learn. Because if I can learn something that I didn't know, surely that only just benefits not just me, but everyone I potentially come in contact with. And so that's a gift for yourself that you can give. So that's pillar number 2, authenticity, emotional intelligence, vulnerability. And Rajan did that. Guess what happened after Rajan showed up in that meeting and apologized and was super vulnerable? How do you think the team reacted? Do you think they laughed at him? Do you think they mocked him? Do you think they rolled their eyes and was like, oh my God, we have such a weak leader? You know they didn't. They went the other way. I don't know about you, but when somebody apologizes to me and they admit that they have made a mistake, I can feel it in my heart. My heart goes out to them because A, it takes a lot of courage to admit that, and B, I see my humanity in theirs. It's like a mirror. And that's what happened in that team meeting on a random Tuesday morning. The team saw in Rajan themselves. They were relieved. Not just because, Rajan has finally realized. It's less about that, not even about that. They thought to themselves, well, if our manager, if our boss, if our esteemed leader can come in and say something like that, then we can as well. Maybe this is safe. Maybe I can be myself. Maybe I can be authentic. So that's what happens when we really show up. Brené Brown talks about belonging. And she says, true belonging is not about showing up in a certain way. It's about us being who we actually are. So as you go back to your teams, as you go back to your families and your communities, think about how not only you can show up the way you are, the way you really want to be, but how you can encourage those around you to do the same. Pillar number 2. So I mentioned there were 3 pillars. What's the third? Well, now that the team had come together, which is what happens when somebody is vulnerable, they could really enact pillar number 3. Many of you probably heard of Simon Sinek. Yes? Start with why guy. Oh, that rhymed. Start with why guy. Yes? Some of you know him. Yes. So he talks about how when he studied a lot of successful organizations, what made them stand out from the ones that were not so successful. And it's the whole premise of Start With Why. Some of you have probably seen the TED Talk or read the book. You know the idea. But there is so much fundamental truth in that. Because the third piece of belonging is a shared purpose. You are all here today for a reason. Maybe for some of you it's more than one reason. But there are, or is, a big reason for you to be in the same room here today. You have a shared purpose. And when we remember what our shared purpose is, and when it is aligned with each other, that is when magic happens. Think about the moments in time, or your experiences, where you have really felt a team come together. Maybe it wasn't even a team. Maybe it was a group of random people, possibly strangers, who very quickly enmeshed together to form a team. You see this a lot in states of emergency. You see this a lot when something has to be done very urgently and very importantly. So what happens? Why do people, complete strangers, band together so quickly and so cohesively? Because they have a shared purpose. Maybe there is harm being done to someone. Maybe some people's lives are at stake, but it becomes bigger than themselves. They get inspired. They drop what they are doing. And they think to themselves, what needs to be done? What needs to be done for others? How can I contribute to this group or team? So it is possible. More than possible. You see it all the time. And yet, why does it not happen in our workplaces? Because we don't get together enough and really get deep into our why. And our why needs to happen on multiple different levels. Not just the why for people, culture, and sustainability. That's not enough. You need to connect that why on other levels as well. For starters, you need to connect it to yourself. You need to know so clearly why you want to be part of this division. Why is important to you? Maybe it's the people, the culture, the sustainability piece, whatever it is for you. If you've forgotten, remind yourself. There's a reason why you applied for a job in this division. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you were part of another decision that just got kind of subsumed within this one. Okay, that's fine. Maybe you're like, I did not choose this, Louise. That's okay. You're here today. You've chosen it. Suck it up. But remembering why you chose to actually be in this role in the first place is so powerful, because that's what keeps us going. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning. I know my why. When it comes to helping others, I was talking to a few people about this just today. I wholeheartedly believe this world will be a better place with even greater leaders, with better leaders. And not to alienate half the people in the room, but I wholeheartedly believe the world would be a better place if we had more amazing women in leadership. That's my why. That's why I do what I do. That's why I calm my nerves and get in front of you and play the violin, mistakes and all. That's why I stand on the stage, not knowing how you're going to receive me, but I don't care. Because my why is greater than what each of you think of me. That's how powerful shared purpose and alignment can be. So back to Maya and Rajan. When they created psychological safety, when they were able to admit faults and mistakes and be vulnerable, be themselves, amazing things happened. They started sharing ideas, Maya included. Some of those ideas actually went somewhere. They had legs. Innovation happened. They felt more at ease with each other. Imagine having more ease in your teams, what that would be like. There was more joy, imagine that. There was more fun, because each of them could bring sides of their personality they had kept hidden. As a result, because they felt more at ease, more safe, they just had a better time. And here's the thing that we sometimes forget. Some of you have children. Some of them may even be little. You remember what they were like when they were really little, before they started to form an identity and were worried about what other people thought of them? They were just pure bundles of joy. Okay? Some of them may have been pure bundles of too much energy, but they were bundles of joy. Like, they could spend hours in their own little world. And that's what we forget. We do better work when we are in states of joy. We do better work when we are at ease. We do better work when we believe that we can. So what if we started to create that a little bit more in our teams, so that people feel as though they belong? So that's our story for today with Maya and Rajan. It takes courage, but it also takes the willingness to change the way you think, not just about yourselves, but about other people. That is something I'm still working on to this very day. I half joked about my father, but it's true. And my mother, and other members of my family, and some of my friends. I admit it all. And that's the work. And it's some of the most amazing work that I continue to do every day, because the quality of our life is dependent on the quality of our relationships with ourselves and with other people. So today we're here to talk about belonging. Here's another thing about that. You already belong. And it's not just because you've been invited to this amazing event. You already belong to yourself. I once heard this story that I want to share with you, which is this. Imagine on the day that you were born, you were given a human to take care of. And that human is with you every day for the rest of your life. And your sole job in life is to give this human the best life experience ever. That's it. That's your sole job, sole responsibility. That human is you. Your sole responsibility in life is to take care of you, compassionately, lovingly, to give them the best life experience you can. Because when we do that, we naturally are in abundance that we can then do the same for others. So you already belong. You will always belong to yourself unless you think you don't. You will always have someone in your corner unless you treat yourself otherwise. So it really does come full circle back to ourselves and how we can create an even more joyous, loving, and amazing environment in our own minds with our own thoughts. So Maya and Rajan have showed and demonstrated their courage, their tenacity. You, I know, will too. Speaking of courage and tenacity, I can feel it in my body right now, what I'm about to do again. But here's the thing. What's happening here? Physiological symptoms. I can figure this out. I can master this. Which is why, right now, I want to close with one more piece. Oh, my fingers are cold. See? Being vulnerable. Okay.
All right, thank you. Louise, we want to give you this as a token of appreciation from us. Thank you for coming and sharing your insights with us today.